Well, I felt inspired to make this video real quick, since I have a little bit of time before work, and it just seemed like, it was a good time. I'm sitting here in the city, actually, which I don't come to the city very often, but I had an appointment over here, um, and basically I just wanted to talk about land scams. So in the Southwest, especially, it's all over the U.S., really. Um, There are subdivisions that are not up to snuff, we could say. So, um, the thing is, I think the subdivision laws, a lot of them were kind of updated, in maybe the 70s, 80s. A lot of these subdivisions were created in, the 50s, 60s, 40s, 50s, 60s. Um, a lot of the time, they were created arbitrarily by people that maybe weren't, had never even visited the land. Usually it was, somebody bought a big ranch with lots of acreage, subdivided it, and, you know, sold off these little individual lots. And a lot of the time, what they would do is they would promise that there were utilities on these lots, that, they had water, sewer, usually like a community center or something, a golf course, all this stuff. And none of that existed. Um, and so, fundamentally, at least in the New Mexico incarnation of it, they're basically just, an empty patch of land way out in the country somewhere. And subdivided into individual 1 acre or quarter acre or whatever lots. Now, the problem today is that oftentimes they're below the minimum size for what is compliant for with the state regulations, and they're often on very marginal land. So, um, like I own some land in a very rocky, hilly subdivision. It's really steep, and I've lived there, and it's cool to live there because you don't have a lot of neighbors. And it's divided into half-acre lots. If you owned just one of those half acres, you have a good chance of having a half acre that's just vertical, and almost completely useless as an actual like place to live. If you have a few of them that are contiguous, you can get to something that's useful. The problem with the half acre, though, is in New Mexico, you have to have 3/4 of an acre for a septic, which means that if you have one half-acre lot, um, you're kind of screwed. Now, I could go on and on about this topic for like hours, but that's, probably the biggest thing here is that oftentimes the lots are too small to be practical. Now, another thing is that oftentimes the surveys were not done very well, and so um, without having a modern survey done, you don't really have any way of knowing where your land is. And a lot of people in these subdivisions will just go, with their phone GPS, which is only accurate to maybe 50 feet, and will say, okay, this is roughly where my land is. The problem is they could be shifted over to the, to the next parcel over, or, not even in the right area. It's hard to say. So it really pays to get a survey done. These are going to be mostly off-grid. Sometimes, utilities were brought into part of the subdivision. Like I know where the subdivision, what I just mentioned, they brought water into like a corner of it, and so a lot of people live in that area. But then as you go up higher, there's no water because it's really rocky and really difficult to get water up there. So there's no water lines up there. So in order to get water, you'd either have to basically pay the private company that provides the water utility to tunnel, basically drill a tunnel up to your land, and run the water lines. And they'd want to do it, in an orderly fashion. They'd want to run it all the way through the whole subdivision. And obviously, it'd be crossing over a lot of property boundaries, so you'd probably have to go basically down the middle of the road. And then, if so, let's say if you're in like a zigzag from the water main, you'd have to do this to get to your property. You wouldn't be able to just go straight across. And that could be really costly. I know with mine, water was at a depth of they were saying you should drill to about 550 feet, the drilling company, the well drilling company. And that was cheaper. 550-foot well was cheaper than bringing the water line in. And there, I mean, the thing is, too, in the Southwest, you have to understand, we don't have a whole lot of water here. So, um, you know, drilling a well is not really like a good idea, in my opinion. Okay, a lot of people do it, a lot of people live on land with wells, but to me, I wouldn't want to rely on a well because there's a good chance of it eventually running dry. Um, and I wouldn't want to deal with that. It's a finite supply of water, and because of some really poor resource management in these states, that water is really close to running out. And it runs dry all the time. I mean, it's not like this is me just being a doomsday theorist or whatever. This is something that happens constantly. These areas running out of water. So I would say, your best bet is to avoid a situation where you have to drill a well if you can, or drill really, really deep. Drill a good 100 feet below wherever your static water level is or whatever. You want to go real deep because, uh, there's probably more aquifers. There's probably layers of fractures and stuff in a lot of these places. Anyway, some areas you can't get to water. Some areas you can't get water rights or can't get the right to drill. Um, the Taos Mesa is a great example of this. Good luck drilling a well there. And if you can, usually they're around like 900 feet deep, 1,000 feet deep, 1,200 feet deep, somewhere in there, very deep. And there's no guarantee that you're going to hit water. So uh, you're spending, you know, $50,000, $100,000 to maybe not hit water. That's kind of a tough gamble to justify. So that's the situation. And out there on the Taos Mesa, it's usually like half or quarter acre lots. So imagine you need 3/4 of an acre, so you need 3 lots contiguous if they're quarter acre lots, just to be able to. Oh, I may have gotten ahead of myself for septic. I don't know if I said that, but for septic system, you need 3/4 of an acre. So you need 3/4 of an acre for septic. You got to meet setback requirements, which might be the entire width of your lot, which is another problem with the tiny lots, is that their setback might be so big and your lot so small that you might not be able to build. Um, and then, again, water availability in general. Thankfully, on the Taos Mesa, there are wells where you can buy water, that are specifically for that purpose for those subdivisions. But that's still, that's kind of an issue. If you can't get water, you have to go to these wells to buy it, and then you have to haul it in. It's a whole subsystem, whole infrastructure thing that doesn't really exist. So it's tough. I'm not saying it's impossible by any means, but it is tough, and it does add cost and uh, an environmental factor to your decision to live there. And obviously you're going to be on solar power in most of these places, or wind, or a generator. You're probably not going to have electricity, not going to have gas lines. Internet may or may not be available. And yeah, I think the biggest thing is just that the land tends to be somewhat marginal. A lot of it also in the west is open grazing land. So I own another lot, and the reason I'm saying that, I own several different lots in several of these subdivisions. It's kind of like my type of land tends to be, because I don't I at this moment am not especially wealthy, so the type of land I tend to collect is in these subdivisions. And it's kind of neat for me because I can go build a little cabin and I have a place to live, and it's not a huge commitment to be able to live somewhere. But I do have to commit that initial cost of setting everything up. And like on the open grazing land, it's like cows and horses have destroyed my solar panels, killed all the plants I've planted. I mean, you got to really put effort in to fence them out. A single strand, a couple strands of barbed wire isn't going to do it. You really need a good fence, probably an electric fence, which is an additional cost, and it's going to have to be solar powered, right? So there's just a lot to it. It's not really a straightforward thing to live in these places. And another aspect of it, why they call them land scams is, first of all, that they would claim that there's certain utilities available. What they did in Carson Estates and Tres Piedras Estates and that the Taos Mesa area was they claimed that it was a land giveaway. So um, you would essentially be given a piece of land, and all you had to do was pay the documenting and registration costs, which they charged, and this is just money they collected. It wasn't like it was a real cost, but I think it cost them on average like 50 cents a lot or $1 a lot or something, and they ended up charging I think like $25 a lot. So they were making money hand over fist at the time. Of course, now you can still buy that land. A big problem in Taos, and they probably don't want you to talk about this, but I don't care. I'm not in Taos at this point. I kind of pulled out of Taos for the most part because it just is so problematic. Life is tough up there, and people don't really, despite the fact that the majority of the working class of Taos lives on the mesa, the Taos city people, the Taos town people tend to hate people that live on the mesa somewhat. Maybe it's changed since I was last there, but I remember really getting treated like crap. I mean, being spit on, things like that. I mean, they really hated us for being out there, despite the fact that we're the working class. I mean, if it wasn't for us, you wouldn't have gas station attendants. You wouldn't have, anybody running most of your tourist facilities, if it wasn't for us living out there. So I don't get it. But what was I going to say? Oh yeah, Taos County tends to just what they do is they say they register it, they will register it and record it, but they won't guarantee the ownership. With that, that's essentially their way of saying, look, we don't really care who owns this land. If you want to like create a bogus deed, go right ahead. The first piece of land I bought up there had 13 other owners registered to it, so that's something to consider. So I was just added on top, and I can't get rid of it. I mean, I stopped paying the taxes on it. I still get tax bills. I try to sell it to somebody. They still keep me as one of the registered owners. It's like no matter what I do, I can't get rid of that land. And so that's something to keep in mind that, it's beyond just not a great piece of land. It's like the county kind of neglects it, and you may be stuck with a problem if you own it. So I would say there's nothing wrong with buying land scam land, and I think it does have value and a purpose, and it gives, an affordable entry into owning land for people that don't have a lot of money. But don't expect it to grow in value very quickly. And I wouldn't expect it to have what you normally want. I'm looking at land scam land right now, despite living in a regular house with an insurable title. Also, title insurance. You usually won't be able to get title insurance on a lot of these properties, especially in New Mexico, because a lot of them are on old land grants. So the members of the land grant may have sold the land off illegally, but there's also a lot of controversy surrounding it's kind of standard colonialism controversy, who actually owns the land, because it was communal land a lot of the time. But the weird thing is that, in our case, in New Mexico's case, this is like hundreds of years ago, and the titles have already been created and everything, but they're still being disputed. So that's something to just consider, that you may not be able to like get title insurance, build a regular house. That stuff might be a challenge. Again, if you're just looking for a place to camp out, it's fine. When you start getting in, and that's why you'll see a lot of like RVs and stuff, I think. It's because the county tends to not care what you do there because you own something, but you can't do much with it legally. So they just kind of turn a blind eye. But they will also have kind of a blasé attitude about it, like why, why would we care what you do? You think we're going to give you an address? You think we're going to give you a building permit? They tend to be pretty about it. So, yeah, there's just a lot of, I would say, really do your research. Make sure that whoever you're buying it from owns it. And just know what you're getting into. Don't buy land sight unseen. You may have a problem with squatters. That's another common thing. And if you have a problem with squatters, I hate to say it, but in the Southwest, if you've got people squatting on your little acre postage stamp of desert land, you shouldn't have bought it. I hate to say that. it sounds, a lot of people are going to be like, oh, that's messed up. Like, no, you shouldn't have bought it. If, you should have gone and seen it in person before you bought it and made sure there weren't squatters on it. Because if there's squatters on it and it's 10 miles down a dirt road in the middle of the desert, I'm sorry, but the county probably doesn't care. And they're not going to do anything about it. So, and then it's like, you expect them to care? It's just a patch of desert. So I would say that's my take on land scams. I could go way more in depth on this topic, but I felt like I had to make a video. I saw someone, they had bought a piece of land and it had squatters, and it was like some little tiny bit of land out in the Arizona desert, and I was like, yep, that sounds like a land scam, so I got to make a video about it. So here's the video. Anyway, y'all have a great day. Thanks for watching. If you want to hear more about this topic, I have years of experience in this, and I have all kinds of crazy stories to tell about it. So maybe I'll make a more in-depth video. But for now, everybody take care. Thanks for watching. Bye now.